Hi everyone, James from AIM. I'm here with James Colborn. He does all of our webinars for us and is a motorsport fanatic. So yeah, today we're going to go through the SmartyCam 3 range that we've got. Talk you through a few of the little key features and benefits of each one.
Yeah, so what we thought we'd do is, for this, there are 4 cameras to review. We took a take of this just a minute ago and it took quite a long time to go through because there's a lot of content. So we thought we'd go a different route this time. And I'm going to hold the camera up, and in 60 seconds or less, James has to go through the key features of each of these cameras, and then we're going to sit down and discuss the merits of each of them, which one we'd use in what particular application. So, I hope somebody puts a timer on the screen on this one as well. We're going to go, first and foremost, maybe should we go lucky dip, or do you want to go in order?
I don't know really, whatever you feel like.
All right, so let's start off with the entry level camera. So, in 60 seconds or less, talk through the SmartyCam 3 Sport, which is here. Many of you may have seen it.
Okay, so the SmartyCam 3 Sport's our entry level camera. We've got a 30 frames per second 1080p lens. It has to be ideally powered through one of like our other products, like a Solo 2DL, MXS, that sort of thing. It can run on its own, but it needs a external GPS and external power feed. But then you don't get any of the nice overlays onto the video footage. You just get your GPS information. Yeah,
brilliant. All right, so not a bad effort, I think, on that one. Right, so let's select another one as we go through. All right, so we're going to pick up now the SmartyCam 3 GP.
One of my favourites. Okay, so SmartyCam 3 GP. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does I get the 10 seconds back now?
Yeah, no.
SmartyCam 3 GP. So it's our single bullet camera system. So you've got a range of 67, 84, 120 on the bullet camera. You can choose which one you want. Again, you've got a 1080p, but you've got 60 frames per second this time. This is our first camera to do a video output, so you can stream the video footage, you can output the video footage to the pits, and it's our separate recorder box and bullet camera. So yeah, that's the GP in a few seconds.
Awesome, there you go, didn't even need those 10 seconds, which is fantastic. Alright, so next one we're going to go with the sorry about that, the SmartyCam 3 Corsa, which is right here. And yeah, 60 seconds, away you go.
Okay, so the Corsa is our first standalone, well, it's not first standalone, sorry. It's our, in the range of SmartyCam 3 Sports, it's the first camera that can be a standalone system. So you can connect that to a ECU, and that can be its own external data logger. It can run on its own. You don't need a Solo 2DL, you don't need an MXS to run alongside it. That's also the same as the GP, 60 frames per second, 1080p. And yeah, that's the brief overview of the Corsa.
Brilliant. And we're going to finish off this whistle-stop tour of the SmartyCam series with the SmartyCam 3 Dual, which is quite a monstrous camera. It's fantastic. So away you go.
Yeah, so this would be our flagship camera. This is the first time we've done a dual camera. By dual, obviously, 2 bullet cameras. So you can plug 2 bullet cameras into the system, have one forward, one back, one at your feet, whichever it is you want to do. It's also got a video output like the GP, so for streaming, and you've also got the capability with a complete harness as well, so you can have obviously an external mic, you can have a CAN connection, whatever it is you may want to feed into the camera in terms of CAN information. So yeah, again, I think less than 60 seconds, but brief overview. Again, if I didn't mention, it was 1080p, 6 frames per second, exactly the same as the GP and the Corsa.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. That is a quick overview. All the specs, I'm sure, are on the site there, right?
Yeah, if I've missed anything, if you want to have a look on AimShop.com, obviously my 60-second challenge makes me jabber a bit. But yeah, if I've missed anything, we've got detailed technical specifications on the website that you can all go through, have a look on AimShop.com. So yeah.
Brilliant. And so one of the things I think is really interesting as we think about these cameras is the application. Where would you use it? Why would you use it? And I think, I think that's a big decision. The range has expanded, which I think is exciting. There's more cameras to choose from now in terms of options. I still remember the SmartyCam 1, so that probably makes me ancient. But at the same time, let's think about through some of these sort of scenarios as well. And so, from my point of view, and one that I've been lucky enough to use for probably about a year or so now. Is when we got my hands on one of these SmartyCam 3 Sports when they came out. It's the entry-level camera. So what's, in your view, the sort of like the entry-level sort of, what's the application? Where do you see that being used?
So, well, actually, you got one of our very well-used initial SmartyCam 3 Sports, which was used in application that, in my mind, is suitable for it, which is go-karting. Obviously, due to the size of it, the weight of it, it's quite a small camera. It fits nicely with the Micron 5 and karting. And it also crashes well, because as James found out with the one that we gave him, it came off a cart about 70-80 mile an hour and was absolutely fine. So you've been using that and not had a problem, have you?
No, and I think that's a good testament to the strength. And if you are lucky enough to go and actually be able to feel the tactile part of these cameras, the one thing you'll feel is that there is a significant heft to them. They are quite strong in many respects. So when James said, do you want one that's been in a roll, I think it was, or something, had gone over it, I said, well, let's see how it works and how it reviews. And I've been using it for quite some time now. I think it's fantastic. There's a few things that I love about the new camera. The most important thing is the fact that not only is the sort of the quality of the camera work better, in that it's 1080p, which is always nice when you're looking at sort of details and resolution, but also the fact that the overlays are all improved and updated, and not just a sort of like a cosmetic change. There are certain key features that you can now pass through with these SmartyCams you couldn't with the older one. And my favorite, which is available on all of them, but is here with the entry level, which I use first of all, is what's often referred to in the software as lap channels. So when you've got, when you're looking at what's the lap time, best lap, you can also now put on predictive lap. So if you're going through your data, and more importantly, you're now looking through your video, and you can look on the screen and say, at this particular point in the lap I was half a second up, and then all of a sudden you can see you charged the corner a little bit too hard, you missed apex, and you can see that predictive just trickle down. And you can see that on the screen in front of you, which I think is absolutely fantastic and available with all these cameras. And I think the other thing as well, which is particularly nice about all of these new units, is the size of memory you can put in there. So in the older sort of 2.1, 2.2, the GP or the HD versions, we always got asked on our website, many of us are on sort of like forums about AIM stuff as well, was, well, how big's the memory that I can put in there? And while some of them said you can go up to 128 gigabyte, depending on the card and everything you used, you might not always get consistent recording. So we said go with 64 gigabytes, and that's as sort of fail-safe, bulletproof type size memory. The problem you have there is that if you do long races, I was a year ago or so, I used one of the older cameras in a 25-hour race. We got about 11 hours of recording before it switched off, but with 2 terabytes in any of these cameras, that will last probably 2 of those races as well. So immediately there's some sort of core benefits to being able to sort of upgrade in that sort of area, from the quality of video to the differences in the output, to more importantly now as well, how much you can store on it, which is, I think a 2 gigabyte card terabyte card I should say, would probably last everyone's entire races that they ever do ever.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. There. And yeah, I mean, just on the memory and the SD card, an important bit from our side is the software that comes free of charge with all of our cameras, the new Race Studio 3 analysis. Obviously on that SD card you've got data, you've got video files, you've got everything. So one simple upload into our analysis software, you can have combined video and data graphs that are all time synced together. Yeah, it's a fabulous asset to our cameras. By clicking on where you want on the data, you can straight away jump to that point in the lap, and if you're comparing 2 laps, you can straight away visibly see really quickly what was different on the track, what you did, what was maybe the environment around you, what was slightly different on the data that may have caused a slower entry or a faster entry, whichever it may be. And that, for me, from a driving aid's so important.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked about this one being sort of relevant for sort of karting, or sort of in a position. I think this is applicable in many different instances, and we talked previously about the great value for money that you can apply this to. And For the last few years, one of the most popular combinations that I've experienced working with AIM has been the Solo 2 DL and the SmartyCam 2.1. Well, I think this is a great replacement for that SmartyCam if you want to be able to continue that pairing and that combination and still have that sort of cost-effective sort of approach to being able to work that way. But, you know, thinking about that, fantastic entry level, but as we think through some of these particular other sort of products, and before we even get into sort of the bullet cam, I think it's important that we identify sort of like the marketplace for the Corsa, because, you know, it's a fantastic camera, slightly higher quality, which I'm thinking will probably make it fantastic to be able to, you know, put in a closed wheel vehicle.
Definitely. And
probably the most likely like-for-like replacement for the existing 2.1s that anyone has been using for the last few years. Let's talk through that one in terms of the application of the car, because I think that's a fantastic camera that can do a fantastic job in a closed wheel vehicle.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much got it there. For me, this is a closed cockpit saloon car or whatever it may be. This is the perfect camera for that installation. Price point, design, it's an all-in-one camera, obviously lens and obviously the logic, the brains for the camera is all inside, all in one unit. It's got a ECU input, so obviously that's the next sort of step up from what the Sport had, where you can obviously connect that direct to the ECU, so you don't necessarily need to have one of our other devices, just an ECU connection, maybe a GPS into here as well if you want your lap timing, track positioning, and yeah, it's a fantastic camera. And our 2.1 HD was obviously very popular, lots of them around the world, and this is the natural replacement for that with a better quality lens and improvement. So yeah, it's just a natural predecessor from the 2.1. It's a fantastic camera.
Brilliant, I love that. So we've got a sort of transition now as we think about these, and we went through each of these in sort of turn, but there is a distinct difference between sort of like the camera unit that we traditionally would think of in terms of a camera, very similar to, for example, an action camera in terms of size and form function, but then we get into sort of effectively bullet cameras. And so you know, these are my preferred channel. I'm a open wheel racer, so bullet cameras are fantastic for open wheel for a number of particular reasons. But what would you say the major sort of applications are, and why you choose bullet cam over sort of something like one of these more traditional cameras?
So for me, your open-wheeled single-seater approach is 100% needs to be bullet camera. Also for motorbikes as well, is again a bullet camera application. The main reason for that for us is wind noise. So when you mount one of these, for example, if you mounted this on the roll hoop of your Formula Ford, you'd have awful wind noise in the microphone because the microphone's built into the box. Whereas if you just mount this bullet camera up on a roll hoop, or for, like I said, on a motorbike, it was under the fairing, you're not going to get any wind noise because the microphone is again on the recorder box, which you can put out of the way in the tunnel of the car, under the seat of the bike, wherever that may be. But you eliminate the wind noise. But also you have a much nicer looking setup, and some people even run this camera in a closed cockpit purely for the fact of it's a neat, smart install. You could even build this bullet into a surround inside a car if you're making some custom car, or like so a lot of our customers do. And it's a very easy thing to hide away. If you really want that nice high-end finish look, for example, a lot of our customers don't know, but this is used by all of the IndyCar teams. So in the IndyCars, they have inside the roll hoop, you'll see a little black circle, and that's where our camera sits. So that's used for a lot of the team's data, and they use that for the onboard video footage. So yeah, it really is a great bullet camera, and it's fantastic. You've got one on your car, haven't you?
I actually do, and I think there's a few. I couldn't have said it better than James did in terms of that sort of beautiful, minimalistic, sort of ergonomically beautiful design. We all love, I don't know if you, but I love looking at a well set up race car that's got very little inside it. You can sometimes look in race cars and it looks like sort of spaghetti junction inside, and there's sort of cables and wires everywhere as people have set up stuff. So a nice clean install is something that I aspire to, definitely in that sort of instance. But the other thing as well, which I think is important, is depending on the type of racing you're doing and the amount of movement, these are very light. these are quite heavy in terms of substance. So imagine this is mounted with a GoPro mount or something like that. There's still movement, and even though there's a better sensor now in these cameras which smooths out a lot of the movement, you get a sort of what's the best way to use, sort of vibration sort of adjustment. The thing is that this is still a heavy unit compared to this, and so this is mounted and you've got sort of vibrations in your car. You might have, for example, a 4-stroke engine from the 1970s in your car. If you happen to be a Formula 4 driver, there's oftentimes a little bit of vibration, so having these is an easier way of being able to sort of adjust and accommodate. So yeah, I love these. I think they're absolutely fantastic, and depending on vehicle choice in terms of where it was, I think that what is interesting is these may not be suitable for sort of open wheel or bike, but these actually have applicability in any vehicle you're doing. So if you, for example, somebody who wants to transition between open wheel, I'm going to closed wheel, these will work in both as well, so you get a bit more sort of universal application of these as well. So then we get into the final stage, which is I'm lucky enough to have access to one of these SmartyCam 3 Duals. It is, for me, a sort of just a delight to use, but more so it's important to be able to point out as a driver aid. Everything that I think about with a sort of like the SmartyCams, I often use sort of like the very cheesy phrase, which is, GoPros are for show, because if you want to show off that you've been at the racetrack or racing, and I'm sure there's a lot of video analysis you can do with a GoPro, so I don't want to dismiss coaches who use that. When you're able to then start seeing additional enhancement of sort of vehicle input on screen in terms of driver inputs, when you're thinking about feet movements, but at the same time you can then have a second camera that will also monitor different sort of aspects, whether it's, the camera, for me, mine's mounted backwards. And mine's mounted backwards for a simple reason that I race in a competitive series where close wheel-to-wheel racing is commonplace. So it's not necessarily just using data and everything to be able to go fast and get faster. Having the ability with video to be able to improve your racecraft is really quite important. So being able to understand if somebody were to pass you, what positioning they took on the track, how they set you up in terms of, watch what you were doing. Key aspects like that with that rear camera as well is a really interesting sort of variable to be able to understand how to set that up. So for me, it faces backwards, but you've seen other applications as well in terms of the use of the second bullet cam, which I think are quite interesting.
Yeah, so again, you could use that. I completely agree with you with the looking backwards side of things and analysing your competitors with the lines they take. Yeah. But also you could use it for watching the pedals. So for example, you could have one camera facing forward, one camera facing looking at your pedals. For example, if you were, like you mentioned, heel and toe. If you're trying to watch how you could heel and toe, if you wanted to look at the video for your feet when you're from a driving aid point of view. So I know a lot of driver coaches like to have one pointed at the feet, so they can visibly see what everybody's doing. We can have a throttle and a brake traced on there, but again, it's actually visually seeing exactly what's causing them traces to do what they're doing, and that's what's important from a real driver aid point of view, is an actual image of exactly what's going on. So you can see with one bullet exactly where you are on track and at what point, and if the other bullet you're looking at your feet, for example, that can be a very helpful aid to be able to see what the driver's doing.
Yeah, totally. And I think if we go back to the example of the rear-facing camera, you had a great example from Silverstone, I think you mentioned just recently. Yeah. So for me, I was I've not done much racing, but I just started, and it was a wet day at Silverstone, and I had no idea. I had an idea of the line, but not to what extent. And there was a situation where I was going around. What was the corner you said it was called? I think it was Luffield and then sort of Woodcote coming
Woodcote,
out. Yeah.
That was our Woodcote. Yeah, and it was the car behind me got a massive run onto the straight and come sailing past me before we even got to the kink of the start-finish line. And I sort of sat there and went, hang on a minute, how is he so fast down the straight? And when you're just driving, looking forward, you just think, oh my God, have I got a terrible engine or something like that? You think there's a problem. And then when you went back and look at the video footage, you could visibly see the speed he carried into the corner, the line he carried into the corner behind me was completely night and day different. And that's why the momentum he carried onto the straight and came sailing past me, making it like I was in a Nissan Micra compared to what he was in. But when you're driving there and at the moment you think, oh my god, what's going on here? But that's where it's fantastic from a training point of view, is being able to see that at that point. Because before all of this was invented and before we had access to this, you would have come in going, oh my god, there's something wrong with the engine, I've got no power down the straight. Because from looking forward, and when you've got your hands device and strapped in and you can't see, and you would just think naturally that there's something wrong. But then when you can see it's something that you're doing wrong as a person, as a driving aid, that's phenomenal.
Totally agree. I could not agree with you more. I think that all of these cameras are fantastic in terms of being able to remove mystery. I think that one of the key aspects that always exists, and you mentioned this in previous conversations as well, is that it's very easy as a driver. Tell me if you've done this, if you're looking at this as a driver, being able to say, oh, I ran into traffic, I got balked on my lap, or, and there's always a series of sort of conversations. The more data that you have, but with video, takes away mystery. And if you take away the mystery, then you're just left with the facts, and then the facts allow you to be able to then start doing something about it without the sort of like, well, that was a variable that goes away the next time around. So I love that. So I'm going to put you on the spot, James. Which one of these cameras would be for you if you had to choose one?
I think it depends very much on what level of motorsport you're doing. For me, and wanting to, if I was to do racing, I would go with the dual for the reasons we've just described.
Yeah, I agree.
I think from the more information you can get, the more you can learn, the more you can improve. So for me, the dual is the most advanced camera we've got. It brings in the most data, it brings in the most amount of information for me to be able to learn, improve myself, the vehicle, everything. Obviously, that is at our higher end. I think if you are just a track day user that is purely going for a bit of fun and would like to have some basic data analysis, I think I would be going with the Sport, because it's a phenomenal camera for the value. You gain so much more than what you would from a GoPro, but at a fraction of the price more than a GoPro. So I think it really depends what area of motorsport you're going into, and I think that's the beauty of having the range, is we have a camera available for everything. And for motorbikes, the GP, for me, the motorbikes, that is the perfect camera. It's a nice small recorder box that can mount under the seat, and you've got a little bullet camera that can mount under the fairing. Again, you don't see it unless you know it's there. There's benefits for every camera, but for me personally, the dual is the one that if I was to go out in a car tomorrow, that's the camera I'd be fitting to my car.
Yeah, I think you're right. And for me, it's interesting that I feel the same way, that because of my appreciation for what SmartyCams can do and have done, as you progress with more features, you're tempted to be able to spend that a little bit more going forward. But if I was still in a sort of closed wheel car, interestingly, I think I would probably go with the Sport. Just because I think that, you mentioned it right, that when we talk about other things that you can do, and again, I want people to sort of support AIM. I want people to do well, but I think that this camera is fantastic. Any budget that you have remaining from this camera, you could put into additional sensors or something else that would give you just a little bit more, because this is a fantastic camera, and I think that for me that's there. And then, as I said, money was no question at all, the dual without even hesitation. But I think for just general usability everywhere, every different type of scenario, I think that if you're in a position to be able to get the sort of like the GP, because you can put it in closed down open wheel, take it with you, move the camera wherever you want to move it because it's easy to mount, I think that one might actually be the sort of, if you can draw this analysis, the Swiss Army knife of SmartyCams, which is the weirdest thing anyone's ever going to say, which is there. But all particularly fantastic, that one, I think, in many respects. I'm lucky enough to have been able to access many of these and use them. So and I think we should do another session at some point, maybe a webinar, which is best practices in terms of what we've seen using them, where to place your logos, where to place your graphics, where to place your second screen, all those sort of things, which we have been privy to. Well, it's silly having that particular second screen there because I can't actually see anything except for where I'm going backwards, and so I think that's probably a good follow-up. But I think
so too. I think we can go a bit more in depth in some other stuff, but I think that's a very good overview of the 4 cameras. If any of you got any questions, If we've missed something and you want to know a bit more, or the perfect camera for your installation, like I say, come to aimshop.com. We've got obviously a live chat on there if you want to speak to somebody live, technical support, sales guys. There's a phone number. Call us anytime, 9 till 5. I don't think the guys would appreciate, well, the phone won't work at midnight, but especially wouldn't appreciate the call. But yeah, give us a call if you want to speak to somebody. Like I say, there's people available all the time. So yeah, aimshop.com is where you can find the products, where you can find technical support, documentation, any help that you might need. Yeah, just get in contact with us. But yeah, thank you very much for coming in and
thank you.
talking through that.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.